All right, so we are live. Welcome back, everybody, to the all the people who aren't here. Sunday mornings are always a tricky one, but this is when I had time. But I know a lot of folks are off doing other stuff at this time. Looks like we have two people watching, which is cool. Right off the out of the gate, two folks. As long as YouTube doesn't count me as one of them. So today we're talking about Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers for me is that game that I loved. I never got to play enough of it. Kind of stopped playing it over the years because it was hard to find folks who wanted to play, and then kind of got back into it in my adult life over the last decade or so. And I have been enjoying sort of delving back into it. It's still available, so and we'll kind of touch on that once with things get going. But I just figured it was time to chat about it and share it. Now, so if anybody is watching and wants to join in, I did post a StreamYards link in the comments or in the chat there, and so you can use that, and it'll put you in the waiting room. And when I'm ready to have folks come on, I can go ahead and add you in. Uh, so if I look a little bleary-eyed, I'm okay. I just had a rough sleep last night. Ate a very delicious but not overly good for me dinner, and I'm pretty sure that my tired old body is paying for it today. So today will be a day of recuperation. All right, so hey, RW Bishop, welcome. Um, so just to kick off, it was not a precursor to Traveler. It came out in '82, I believe. Um, and so Traveler had already been out by then. I believe this was TSR's answer to Traveler. This was coming out from the folks who brought us D&D. It wasn't their first rodeo as far as science fiction, but it was their first rodeo into this sort of um, space truckery sort of semi gritty science fiction. Prior to that, they had done Metamorphosis Alpha, and then they had also done Gamma World. But both of those are very different and are similar in nature. Metamorphosis Alpha is about mutants on a spaceship, and Gamma World is about mutants on planet Earth. And if I recall correctly, at one point there was even an attempt to sort of link those, that Metamorphosis Alpha took place on a spaceship that had been used as an arc to get away from Earth when the big collapse happened. Anyways, we're not talking about those games today. We're talking about Star Frontiers. Yeah. So, and hopefully, as I go through kind of the history and greatness that is Star Frontiers, you'll learn a little bit about it. So, to start with, let me go ahead and pull this up on my screen here. Star Frontiers, when it first came out, was a standalone game. It was one of TSR's box sets. It was written by a number of different folks, are credited with it, but I believe that Dave Zeb Cook was one of the motivating forces behind it. And if you're not familiar with him, he also wrote like Isle of Dread, and a couple of other really good things that my poor memory escapes me. But so yeah, it's he when it came out, it was initially a box set in a purple box. Here's a picture of that, and in my opinion, Star Frontiers is probably one of the greatest box sets to come out, if not the greatest box set to come out in the '80s. So much was packed into this one box, and gave us so much to work with as players. So in the box, you can see here kind of from left to right, you got the box cover. There was then a fold out city map, um, and you know a sheet of cardboard counters with all of the critters and stuff that are presented within that initial box set, plus vehicles and character chits and everything like that. You then had a basic game, which was so cool at the time because here's a short little 16-page book that lets you dip in, learn the game, learn the basics of the game, even go through a little mini adventure, and then it would advance. And so here is the basic game, the basic book. They're sort of shown out of order, and then it had the expanded rules, which were the full game, but you got both in one box. And so once you had sort of cut your teeth on those basic rules and you were really ready to dive into the nitty gritty and ramp it up and start delving into everything that Star Frontiers had for you, you had the expanded game rules. And so those would have that, had the full skill system. It had the full character generation rules, the rules for robotics, all of the equipment, and then uh, your in addition to all that, the box set also came with a fold out cover, cardboard cover, um, and a map and a module. Basically, it's the old school module style where you had the fold out cardboard outer cover and then the module booklet. So in this box set, you have a map of a starport, basically, a bunch of counters to use for the remainder of your Star Frontiers gaming, because these basic things on these counters would repeat through several printed modules and then on ad infinitum. I mean, some of the creatures didn't always repeat, but yeah, your basic game to get you started and to play with for a bit. I mean, you could have a lot of fun with that basic game, and then expanded rules and a module, but not just a module. It's a module that kicks off a 3 module campaign all on the same planet that just delves deep into the expanded lore of this world and has the players going through a series of adventures leading up to the final climax there, and then leaving you with the whole rest of the planet to explore. Um, so one thing that is absent in this first box set is it did not really get into the nuts and bolts of space travel. It is assumed that you can travel through space because you start on a spaceship, although the spaceship that is presented in here uh, does not fit the later geometry and design concept of the spaceships in Star Frontiers. There have been some fan versions that sort of retroactively make it fit in, but um, the only real negative, honestly, for this initial foray into the game is that the adventure, as presented, is kind of a buzzkill. Um, they let you go through the process because this is assuming that you're playing now with the expanded rules, and you've now gone through the trouble of making your character and equipping and outfitting them with all of their gear, um, and then spoilers, um, the adventure kicks off with you crashing on a planet and basically losing everything, and then putting you into a situation where you have to survive. So, a little bit of a downer note on that initial startup, but it is still worth it. And once you get past that, the adventure is great. So the product line then continued into its purple, or it's pink phase, I guess you could call it. And this is when when they were coming out with the sequel box set, which brought into it all of the mechanics and system for spaceships and everything that goes with them. Um, they wanted to unify the boxes, so they came up with this very standout, definitely can't miss it box. But you can see because of the framing on the cover of the box, um, our heroes there are a little smaller, and the picture isn't as great. Um, but still, no big deal. You can also see that the TSR logo had changed to the new branding. But again, it was everything. The box set contents were the same. It was, you know, your basic game, your expanded game, all the counters, all the adventures, and everything. Um, then let's see. Did I not grab a picture of Nighthawks? All right. So I'll have to talk about Nighthawks, but here's the cover of Nighthawks, or the cover art. Great art throughout this product line. Interior and cover art was always really great. There were some stinkers, but what product line doesn't have that? But for the most part, it was great. And even though the artist may change here and there, it was pretty nicely done. So Nighthawks then was a new box set, and I will actually, while I'm talking here, I'll see if I can find a picture of the Nighthawks rules. But Nighthawks was following the same pattern that we had seen um, in uh, in Alpha Dawn, which that's another thing. When Star Frontiers, when they came out with the new box set, they decided to give them subtitles, so they're both now Star Frontiers. The original Star Frontiers was now Star Frontiers Alpha Dawn, and remained referred. They would continue referring to it as such um, forever after that. And then and then the Starship Combat version was called Nighthawks. So we had Alpha Dawn and we had Nighthawks, and so actually here I think I found a good picture of the contents of the product range for. Um, all right, let me go ahead and pull this over here. Here's the Nighthawks box. So Nighthawks, again, following the same mold. That's Alpha Dawn. Where is Nighthawks? Nighthawks, where'd you go? All right, hold on. I wanted Nighthawks. Where did it go? There it is. Sorry about that. All right, so let's get this over here. Here's the Nighthawks. All right, Nighthawks. Bit of a stumble there. So Nighthawks was your Starship Combat. Again, you have your um, tactical operations. So this one was broken down slightly different. Again, you had fold-out maps and you had counters. You had a sample adventure, which is the Warriors of White Light. You had the tactical operations manual, which in this game could be considered sort of your basic book, your basic rules book, because this is just the combat system for the Starship Combat. And so you could. The nice thing about this was it was set up to be played as just a tactical game, which they would then later produce miniatures for the ships, or you could then use the campaign book here to integrate spaceships into your RPGs. And the neat thing was it had full construction rules for your ships, where you would build them, their engines, their systems, cargo capacity, weapons, and all of that. It even had rules for like transporting cargo and what kind of rates and stuff you could get. Really allowed you to start doing that space trucker thing that kind of going back to your question, Bishop, um, was that traveler-esque feel. So we're just talking about the products right now and what came out. So they then did a number of really good modules, and actually, let me pull this up here real quick. So they did a lot of modules, and not as many as D&D, of course, but we did get a fair number. And so, you can see they ranged across modules designed for Star Frontiers, modules designed for for Alpha Dawn and Nighthawks. The one of them, like the Mutiny on Eleanor Moraes, never know how to pronounce it. That, although published as an SFKH module, which is how they designated the Nighthawks modules, was for the most part an Alpha Dawn module. It just had a spaceship in it, and so I think because Nighthawks was the new thing, they tagged it as a Nighthawks adventure, even though a good chunk of it is on the surface of a planet. So products were great for the game, but the art was one of the things that really stood out for me. And we had great cover images, like from the mildly stylistic, like this, showing a Sathar riding a Sathar attack beast, and Sathar are the big bads in this campaign. Other module covers like this one from Star Mist. Let's see, the cover of Nighthawks. This one is cool. This is Mission to Alcazar. This is a kind of a cruddy picture of it. Let me see. Do I have a better picture of it? No, I do not. All right. So Mission to Alcazar, um, which it's a great picture. Shows it about the Explorer vehicle in action. It's Larry Elmore art. Um, Combat pictures showing Sathar fighting, UPF assault scouts. Just really great art overall. There's modules again. This is the cover of one of the Volturnus modules showing the Ulmor riding their Lopers. These are sort of the enigmatic race that lives on Volturnus, the planet in that series. Here's the cover to Eleanor Morales. But the interior art, like I mentioned before, was also really good. We had great art in different styles, showing that always tried to show a mix of humans and the various alien races that were in the various alien player races. Um, this is a great one. This is a Dralocyte, which is sort of an amorphous alien uh, beating up a bunch of space monkeys. While Vrusk looks on, and I've always thought that Vrusk was just sort of going, "Wow," watching this Dralocyte kick ass. Um, um, Even fun little filler pieces like this really set the tone and the style. You can see it's got that great late 70s, 80s style of science fiction. Um, and we're talking about a setting where we have energy clips and energy belts and energy packs and things. Awesome color pictures like this. I'm not sure where this is from. I want to say this is just a standalone piece of art that may have appeared in Dragon or something. But you can see we got Dralocytes and Vrusks and Yserians and just great stuff. So it's a good segue. So in Star Frontiers, I've always thought that Star Frontiers kind of mirrored the model of D&D in that it started you out with 4 basic races. So Star Frontiers takes place in a spiral galaxy. It's never said specifically if it is our spiral galaxy, the Milky Way, or another one. But it has humans, though they are not from Earth. And then you have the Vrusk, which are a sort of centipede, mantis-y. The nice thing about the races in here is while it may present insectoid, the Vrusk actually have an endoskeleton. So they're kind of, yes, they look like bugs, but they're not bugs. Hey, Squirrel Hermit, welcome. So if you missed it, Hermit, I've got a StreamYard's link higher up in the chat. We had Dralocytes, who were an amoeboid, amorphous, shapeshifty, asexual sort of alien life form. And so all of them had some minor special abilities. These guys could, in addition to being able to shapeshift, could also they had lie detection, which is really cool. Vrusk had this weird versatile dexterity that, their joints bent both ways. And then you had the Yserians. Yserians were sort of berserker flying monkeys. They couldn't really fly. They had the patagia between their limbs that allowed them to glide. They didn't like bright light, thus the goggles, and they had a berserker frenzy, so they were fun. And the initial book, the expanded rules had these great anatomical drawings of them. Now there's another product that I mentioned that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the Zebulon's Guide, and that's because Zebulon's Guide is sort of a love-hate. Yes, it expanded the game and brought in some new equipment, and then it brought in 4 new races. But it is sort of controversial in that it spelled the death of the game, and it was really a product of that sort of mid-stage, beginning of the end politicking that was really starting to plague TSR when it came out. Zebulon's Guide was supposed to be 3 books, got cut down to 1 that only made it to print. The other 2 I don't even think were ever produced. And the author of the book, I think it's Kim Eastland, did not really like Star Frontiers, and so he kind of gutted the system, tried to give it a new system that was based more around the Universal Table that had become popular with TSR's Marvel Superheroes game, which works wonderfully for a superhero game, but it kind of stunk for Star Frontiers. Now, there's some people who love that system, and more power to them. Play what you like. Um, but it did mean that all of the new expanded information that came out was then sort of mechanically geared towards this new vision that they had for Star Frontiers. There were articles and such that were published in like Dragon to bring them back to Alpha Dawn standards. Um, as far as I understand it, the author of Zebulon's was a huge fan of Gamma World, and so kind of worked Gamma World stuff into the game. And please ignore the police going by my house. I'm on a major road, so you'll hear them. Considering the Osakar here, these are mutant plants. We have the Huma, who are sort of mutant kangaroos. This drawing, which completely looks nothing like the description of the Ifschnitz, and then the Mechanon, which I've never liked this drawing. This looks like a Mechanon who's trying to appear like a Sathar. But the Ifschnits are supposed to be, they're for all intents and purposes dwarves. Or gnomes. They're mechanically inclined. They are short and hairy, although they're described more as fuzzy instead of beardy. And then the Huma are kind of, well, they're kangaroos. So that kind of runs through the products and the races. The setting is very much a kind of corporate future, where you have the Pan Galactic Corporation, which sort of oversees everything, and it's played in a frontier setting. There's a much larger backdrop to the setting, but most of the action is supposed to be played on the frontier. Each of the core four races had their own sections of space, and then they met out in space and they decided to sort of explore the frontier together. And then they ran into the Sathar, which are those cruddy, wormy looking guys that were on that one picture that I showed you earlier, riding the beast. These guys here, that's the Sathar or Sathar, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And they are a weird sort of mind controlling wormy menace that is never really overplayed in the setting. Volturnus has some encounters with them, and they do show up on other scenarios too. Let me see here. I think I got some covers. No, I don't. But there's there are a number of adventures where they show up, or the remnants of things that they've done show up, but we don't really run into them too frequently to where they really become trite and boring. And I appreciate that. And the other intelligent races in the game are often depicted as either enigmatic remnants of some ancient um, precursor race, which this universe has, and I like that because that gives a GM a lot of room to lay down stuff into the universe. Or the races are just kind of local sapients who haven't quite hit that tech level. Um, there's indications of earlier meddling by this ancient race, and their name escapes me at the moment. But as the game goes on, you kind of discover more and more, and from there, you really do have an opportunity to do just so much with just the basic building blocks. I mean, Star Frontiers as a game has so much going for it, and it was only ever 2 box sets and a dozen or maybe a dozen modules. There were Dragon articles and some articles in pages like Ares and stuff like that that also covered some stuff. Some of the other magazines like Imagine and I think maybe even White Dwarf, although I can't say for sure on that, had done some coverage of them. And then today we have uh, a wonderful, series of fan magazines, which I placed links to in the description, because we've got Frontier Explorer and we've got um, uh, Star Frontiersman, and those are both really great, um, really great modules that are really great fan magazines. Excuse me, stammering. Um, that I feel are uh, that have kept the game alive and well, even if it's only with the diehard fans. Here's some covers from Star Frontiersman. Star Frontiersman and Frontier Explorer are not just your typical like flimsy little few pages of um, fanzine. They are really labors of love, and some of the issues have gotten pretty damn big. Um, so uh, it's it's a lot of good stuff, and like any good magazine for a game, um, it has some repeat content. And I think that's a good thing when you're talking about expanding a universe, because it presents players with options on how they want to handle things. There is, for example, an old Dragon magazine article on how to handle power armor in Star Frontiers, um, which, as an aside, always seemed odd that it wasn't there from the beginning. But I'm going to say that that was probably just a creative choice rather than lack of the ability to do so, because all the basic elements are in the game from the very get-go. You've got powered exoskeletons, you've got armored spacesuits, and you've got weapons, you've got power armor. But so there's where I was going with that, there's an article in Dragon magazine that has a system for building power armor. And I think that over the span of both the fan magazines, Star Frontiersman and Frontier Explorer, that same concept is explored at least twice, twice more. And I think Zebulon's Guide may have actually dipped a toe into it, though. Being that I kind of hate it, I'm not able to really quote it off the top of my head. So yes, Star Frontiers is really alive and well, and that's actually a good segue, because there's a great Facebook group by that very name, Star Frontiers Alive and Well, that I will be adding to the link, to the information. Hey, Echo, welcome. Um, and that that Facebook group is wonderful. Lots of great ideas shared there. The file section has lots of useful stuff. People posting pictures. I have posted a bunch of deck plans and things that I have made for um, kind of head cannon vehicles and spaceships. So, um, you know, that is what's out there for Star Frontiers. And I feel like I kind of burned through that real quick. Um, so what else is there to say about Star Frontiers? Uh, Play style. With Star Frontiers, you've got, and I started to say this kind of before I was talking about how it's presented. They sort of gave you the core four races, which in my brain always seemed like they were paralleling what you had with D&D, where you had humans, elves, dwarves, and halflings. And so Star Frontiers, you have humans, Yazirians, Dralicites, and Vrusk. And between those three, you get a good spread of player options. They then expanded that to the four additional from Zebulons, and love them or hate them, they still do provide you with a good additional four races. Issues of Dragon expanded that to even more additional races. But play style is kind of whatever you want to make it. It's a huge sandbox of a setting. The default is, and this is where most of the modules kind of are written from, but you could easily change it up. The default assumption is that you're working for the Pan Galactic Corporation, and that you're going out doing things like, checking mysteries, looking for Sathar incursions, surveying planets for corporate exploitation. You're an agent of the corporations. That said, with Nighthawks and the ability to own and operate your own ship, uh, you did have a little bit more freedom of movement, and you could start doing things like, independent exploration and stuff. But because there's that corporate angle to everything, dollars and cents is a thing. Um, there is always the threat of the Sathar out there, and that can appear in a number of different ways. Because one of the things that the Sathar do a lot, or Sathar, um, is they engage in. They tend to fight most of their fights through clandestine means, using agents, sleeper agents, hypnotized or mind controlled, and they are kind of ruthless in that regard. Um, they even have things like um, suicide explosives that they put on themselves and their agents to make sure that they can't be captured. Very secretive. But they're not the only menace out there. There are pirates and there are mercenaries and there are unauthorized operations that you'll run into that are trying to exploit planets and their inhabitants. Um, it is stylistically not as gritty and rough as Traveler, though I have to put out one caveat. I'm not a Traveler player. I've never really got into it. Star Frontiers was my game of choice back in the day, so I can't speak too much to Traveler. But I know Star Frontiers is not quite Star Wars. In fact, I would say it's probably farther from Star Wars than it is from Traveler. I feel like it plays very much more into the Traveler bent than it does Star Wars. Even though it's been compared to Star Wars, I think that's an unfair comparison based on some people's views on the mechanics, which are not super cumbersome, which I appreciate. It's a percentile based system, makes it really easy to know what you can and can't do because you literally can see the percentage chance. Those percentages are modified up or down by environment and other elements that might be going in there. But the skill system, it's a skill-based game. There are no classes, though your characters usually will have a specialty. And the skills will let you do a lot. You can reprogram robots on the fly. You can repair robots, um, and the uh, Alternity was an interesting option. In fact, it was kind of cool because at one point they wrote up the Star Frontiers races for Alternity, um, and yeah, Facebook the Facebook group is good. Go to the Facebook group and join it. It's a great community. Um, the most outspoken voice for keeping Star Frontiers alive is got to be Thomas Veralt. Um, Also known as Gerion. He has the Tabletop Taproom YouTube channel, but he's also the editor uh, of the current volume 2 of Star Frontiersman. He has been an editor for the previous Star Frontiersman volume as well as Frontier Explorer. He's written a lot of articles. He's incredibly knowledgeable about the universe, and so when I'm writing stuff for the game, I often pick his brain because he's the sort of guy who can tell you, "Oh yeah, that would probably be on this planet or whatever." Um, and that kind of dovetails back into what I was saying about the style of play. And the nice thing I like about Star Frontiers is the base assumptions are um, nice and playable, and you can have action and adventure. You can have mystery. You can have basic, you know, you can do milk run space commerce with things that come up, or you can get into the real nitty gritty of it. There is an opportunity to get um, pretty crunchy if you want. And that is also great because the game doesn't break because of that. I think that's true with a lot of games, but some games you just feel like, I mean, if you want to get down into the calculations of actual cargo and commerce and all that, Star Frontiers will allow for it. Um, some comments on the technology in Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers is written, of course, from that 1980s perspective. Um, but I feel like it presents a nice future proofed setting. Um, your robots are limited in their function, but I would say that that is part of the setting as much as it is their understanding of tech, because we have the capacity for higher intelligence, artificial intelligence in Star Frontiers, but we don't. And excuse my dog, I believe my wife just got home. But like weapons technology ranges from regular guns to cool things like needlers and webbers, and you've got lasers and other energy weapons. Um, you've got defenses in the form of suits that provide various protection, and then screens. These are the basic setups, but it also has melee weapons. But those melee weapons can be everything from a mundane sword to a vibro weapon, and then even into like some sonic weapons and stuff like that. Um, you have wearable computers, you've got jetpacks, rocket boots, a universal energy clip system, which and what they call parabatteries, which are the basic power systems for all of the equipment in the game for the most part. Um, and so when you pick a piece of equipment, it'll tell you if it uses a standard E-clip or has to use a parabattery and what rating that is. And so it's very, very streamlined in that regard. Vehicles range from standard ground vehicles with wheels to hover vehicles, all the way up to um, flying vehicles, not gravity, not anti-gravity vehicles, but like ducted fan kind of vehicles. You have helicopters, and which is an interesting choice. But I mean, helicopters are a nice, reliable technology, and so they still make sense that they'll be using in the future. Um, and some of the vehicles are really cool. Like the Explorer is described as this gigantic van with massive wheels, and some of the art interpretations show that it looks like it might even have, if not two full levels, at least a elevated cockpit, and it's got an airlock in it and everything like that. So they're designed to be rolled around on hostile planets if you want. Uh, their Zebulon's guide does introduce the concept of psionics, if that is something you like in your games. Though I'm not so sure their version of it is the best. There have been a couple of versions that have been published in the fanzines, I think, that work a little bit better, and some of the concepts were further explored in Dragon. But yeah, I mean, that is Star Frontiers in a nutshell. A nutshell that took 40 minutes to describe. I do have some more art that I wanted to share here. Let me go ahead and pull this up here, because some of the interior art for the modules is great. So this is, and they're always really evocative. So here we have an on-world scene. Let me go and make sure that's actually showing for you. An on-world scene where the crew of the PCs ostensibly are on a river and they're getting attacked by a worm here. Um, we have also then, let's see, where are we? This giant rampaging construction robot being faced off against by what might be other robots or could just be tanks. Let's see. We then also have cool art interior. A lot of this is just interior art from the modules. This is from the rule book, and this shows a great bit of downtime. You can see the sort of damaged. I believe this is actually in the skill section where they're talking about. You got a damaged explorer in the back. You got a human on the lookout. We got another human repairing it, being assisted by a Dralosite. Meanwhile, another human is patching up an injured Vrusk. So, great bit of fan art, or not fan art, but scenic art for the in modules. But speaking of Alternity, I think Echo, you mentioned this when Alternity came out and tried to reinterpret the aliens. Um, some of these pictures are from the Alternity, some are not. I believe these two here are from Alternity. Not sure where these ones come from, but yeah, these are later interpretations of that early art. Although I feel like these later interpretations are maybe a little too edgy and kind of destroy the feel, um, uh, of that kind of grounded universe. That's the one thing I do like about Star Frontiers is, despite everything that it has in it, it does feel remarkably grounded even still. I Like I said, it's closer to Traveler than it is to Star Wars, and these, like this extreme Vrusk, just Vrusks aren't supposed to be scary. They're just bugs. In fact, they're very logical, business-minded creatures, and you know this Yazirian looks like, they're doing a very bad vampire impression. I don't know where this human or this Dralosite comes from. But yeah, the art from the original game is in my opinion much better, and depicts these as actual beings, not something, not enemies. There's one great fan artist. I think it's Jensen, and that's done some fun reinterpretations of the races. Squirrel Hermit. Star Frontiers is definitely worth a look. It is still available for sale on DriveThru. Um, you can get the PDFs for it, and they don't. Last I checked, I don't think they do the print on demand for them though. I could be wrong on that. It's been a while. Um, Gamma World I like, but as the editions went on, I liked it less and less. I feel like they tried to they tried to push it too far. Here are some good interpretations of Sathar. I really like this artist's interpretation of the Sathar. He's having a little fun with the Dralosites trying to appear like people here, which is funny. Um, the version of the Huma that he comes up with is interesting because it makes it look way less fuzzy kangaroo. Um, I would agree with you to a degree. Um, there is Star Trek is plausible until you really think about it. Star Trek is plausible in that they make it they retroactively made it plausible. I do enjoy the Star Trek universe and I enjoy role playing in it, but I do find that watching the shows can sometimes, especially like later on as it went on, it really loses something when everything is just comes down to inventing some new form of radiation or power field. But I get what you're saying. um, Going on with this fan artist here, um, another sketch that they did was, these ones are really cool because this shows all of the races kind of in comparison. You have Rusk, a Yazirian, a Dralosite, that's Sathar. um, they jokingly have a Bikini Sapien. um, Another interpretation, the Mechanons, maybe. The Queequeg here is a creature, not so much an intelligent species, um, but that's on Volturnus. This version of the Osakar is very nice. And the Ifschnit here is definitely better than the Space Dwarf. I do appreciate it. Much better than the Space Dwarf that we had in the actual Zebulon's guide, this little dude here. This Huma is still kangaroo-y and not, if that's an actual word, kangaroo-y, and not the sort of weird alien that it was in the other picture. Here's a close-up, or maybe a better interpretation of that Osakar with some interpretations of the equipment. Um, I like the fact that we get a good look at the Osakar's anatomy here. They've always been kind of a weird one. And you'll notice this ship here is shown in a tail lander position, like all of them. And that's one thing I didn't actually get a chance to talk about. And that's in Star Frontiers is a science fiction universe without artificial gravity. There is no artificial gravity in Star Frontiers, so the ships are um, uh, arranged with their decks perpendicular to the front of the ship, to the line of the ship. So they're stacked like a skyscraper. If you've watched The Expanse recently, it's another example of how the Expanse ships fit perfectly into Star Frontiers for the most part. Um, and so they land on the planet on their tails when they can land. Otherwise, they use shuttles. Not, I mean, the shuttles and the fighters, of course, aren't stacked like that, but they do have some pretty small vessels like the Assault Scout, which are even still stacked like that. It makes for some fun play. Um, Gravity, of course, in those cases is achieved by continual acceleration, and then they kind of turn around and decelerate, which then gives them gravity as they're inbound to the system. Makes mapping the ships really interesting and fun. It's an awesome exercise in placement and space. In fact, maybe I can find a deck plan here. In fact, I know I can find a deck plan here for you. Just a moment. That way I can show you what I'm talking about. Woo, imagine that. All right, so just a second here. Bear with me while I look through some files here and find a deck plan. All right, so I'm going to pull up one of the official deck plans, and you should be seeing that on your screen. Yeah. All right. So what we got here is we have a light freighter, and you can see that the decks are stacked. We got the observation dome, which is above the bridge. This is a pretty frequent design feature um, on some ships. Some of them will have a flying bridge, although in this case, for example, you have the upper bridge and a lower bridge. Um, because of the space constraints in these ships, they often have to decentralize some of their systems. And so then we've got the crew deck, where you've got quarters and mess, and then the shuttle here. Shuttles in this game are often dual purpose as an escape pod and a interface craft, because this ship would not be able to land. And then it's got these big cargo holds that can have containers put in them. And then they got the maintenance deck. Uh, and I believe there might be another deck below this, but I'm not going to go digging for it. So this is an example of a sort of a mid-range ship. Um, and if I can pull up the Assault Scout here, I know I have it. Just a moment here. Or an Assault Scout at least. Yes. So here's an example of an Assault Scout. This ship, you can see, is very small. Each one of these squares is 2 meters. That's the standard map convention for Star Frontiers. And so you will see here that we've got the Sky Bridge. I mentioned before, the flying bridge or Sky Bridge, the lower bridge, and then you've got the crew deck, and then the crew quarters. And then there's um, and this is showing an armed and unarmed version. So on the armed version, what is just a sitting area on the unarmed version becomes now a gun station. You've got engineering and then the storage deck. Um, so small ships. This is actually a good size ship for an adventuring party, um, because you can see that it only really requires a small group of crew. It has space for um, you know all your PCs for a larger group. Might keep in mind these games were being made back when the expected game size size of group at the table was like between 6 and 8. So it makes sense that you have 7 or so crew on this ship, um, 7 or 8. But you could play it with NPCs. It's not a problem. Um, and so yeah, I mean that it's a good feel for this particular ship. One other cool piece of art by Jansen was this one. Shows an armored Vrusk. Very modern styling. I'm not too huge a fan on that, and a cowboy Dralosite, so that's a fun one. I did mention earlier that there were miniatures. They did come up with miniatures for both spaceships and um, for figures. The figures were 25 millimeter back in the day, and the spaceships were multi-part and lead. These were or lead or leadless pewter, so you had a lot of weight on a tiny little base. The cool thing is that if you can track them down, there are some modern designers who have remade some of the classic Core 4, and the robots. If as long as you can find some robots for that kind of retro styling. Um, the ships are available again. If you look out there, there are some STLs for them. I think there's some on drive through, so you can actually print the ships and The neat thing I found about the ships, at least for the UPF ships, these ones over here, is the STLs were easy to cut into pieces, so I could customize and new ship designs through a very simple STL editor and make expand the range of the figures. Um, I think that given how big the maps are, um, the scale for the hex for the squares in the maps for the deck plans, they would work really well with 15 millimeter. With one square equaling about 2 meters in ground scale, a 15 millimeter figure might be a little big, but definitely doable. And that way, you could use the deck plans just laid out on the table or printed out, um, and then use 15 millimeter figures with them. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say a lot more about this game, other than getting into specifics. Um, and so I mean, if folks, I see that we have 5 people watching, which I think is actually 4 because I think it counts me because I'm monitoring the stream in YouTube as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, if folks have questions, I would definitely love to answer them. Let's see. Galactic travel is addressed through a convention that is accidentally discovered, basically, that provides a loophole in physics in the universe that allows them to slip into the void. So they do void jumps, and the void space speeds up travel through space. So it's kind of a hyperspace equivalent, but they have to hit 1% of light speed before they can go to void space. So you have to accelerate for a bit of time before you can get there. So it is still a setting where getting places takes time. It just doesn't take forever and generations to get there. Um, there are no transporters in the the setting as written. I think there have been some fan submissions for how to bring that in if you wanted to. Um, Everything is generally physical interface craft, shuttles, drop pods, landers, things like that. I've had fun creating a good amount of new ship designs for it myself. I'm more of a map it and then let somebody else stat it kind of a person. One of my ideas was this thing, which is a uh, this is what I like to call a um, mission lander, deployable mission lander. This is a ship. This is a module that it's outside diameter and conforms to a standard cargo module for a light cargo ship. It is not a spaceship in and of itself, and it is designed to be carried into position by a commercial cargo vessel and then deployed planet side. So it would be good for like independent science operations or for corporations that don't necessarily want to dedicate a ship. It's the sort of thing that you put down on a planet after you've surveyed it. As you can see, it's pretty involved. We got a sick bay. We've got the central operations, the main entry with which goes to an elevator that goes up and down with an airlock. We have office, and I always I always include bathrooms on my ships. That's kind of funny, but it's just a thing. We've got a utility elevator. We've got a kitchen. We've got freezer space. You know, crew bunks with showers. Um, I even put a gym over here. Um, if we go into, see, I can actually zoom into it a bit. We got, a brig, life support. I've put everything I can. I got a light vehicle bay, main stores. Uh, this is an airlock lift out the bottom of the ship. Um, then on the lowest level here, we have a heavy vehicle bay, which opens out to a ramp, and then the airlock, which also gives access to the generator, ship's computer, and then the access to the utility lift. Um, and then on the upper dome of it, we have the commander's quarters, junior officers, and their shared bathroom. There's an observation deck here that can actually leads up to a laser turret. They have a communications dish, which is under a protected dome and can be deployed. We got lifts throughout, but this is a great example of how the ships are laid out. This is a very complex design, and I did this in Dungeon Fog. This is way more of a map than they would present in the modules of old, but then again, this is also mapping with newer technology. Just happy to have heard about this. Thanks. You know, it is. I feel like Star Frontiers is a better game for folks who are looking for something fun to play, um, uh, and uh, don't necessarily want to feel like they have to learn a massive universe. Um, because you can play it on a very basic level. All you need to understand is that you have a group of guys and that there's a pan-galactic corporation. There's also a star law, which is cool because star law is sort of the marshals of the setting, and they have some pretty cool stuff that they've released in Articles and Dragon that express like their level of technology and stuff. Think of them as not as lethal Judge Dredds, but still with the authority of a Judge Dredd. They just don't, they're not going around killing people. They're going around and arresting people. Um, but yeah, it's so Star Frontiers is definitely one of those games that um, it's you can dive in. But I think the neat thing about Star Frontiers and I keep saying the neat thing and a neat thing about Star Frontiers that always appealed to me was that whereas I felt Traveler sort of hand waved and poo pooed space adventure in a way, um, Star Frontiers is still a game, and you see this in some of the modules where you can do a good old fashioned dungeon crawl. There is lost technology out there. Sometimes you might be in the caves on an alien planet dealing with, chambers full of lava and strange crystals and ooze monsters. And for that reason, it has often just been kind of decried or diminished as D&D in space. But I think that is being unnecessarily cruel to the game, because it is not that. It is more. Um, just because you can play that doesn't mean that it is that. I mean, you can do dungeon crawls in Traveler. Um, you can do dungeon crawls in Call of Cthulhu. And Call of Cthulhu is definitely not a D&D style game, but even Chaosium has published early beginner adventures. Um, Doorways of Darkness, I think it was the book, or what it was the book that was a bunch of um, early adventures for beginners, and one of them is literally a dungeon crawl because they know that a lot of people may be coming from other games where dungeon crawls are the thing, and now and this helps them kind of that transition from the old dungeon crawl games to less dungeon crawl games. And Thomas Ferrald, I mentioned him before. He has an entire campaign that is sort of a medical drama that takes place on one city, one of the big cities on in Star Frontiers. And you could definitely play an entire campaign and never leave a planet in this game. And because there's a big wide universe with this kind of corporate attitude, and while I mentioned the Pan Galactic Corporation, there are other corporations like Streel and stuff like that. And these companies all are, have their own hands in various cookie jars and the like. And so even if you were to play on a single world, like in a big city, think of all the things that these corporate entities might bring back to that city, or the machinations of these corporations that are all packed into these cities. You could play very cyberpunky type stuff in Star Frontiers. You could play Star Trekky stuff in Star Frontiers. If there's a campaign I want to run, which puts the players in the role of um, basically working for this kind of startup company that is um, trying to dip a toe into the exploration and exploitation bracket, racket for the rest of the corporations are doing. So what they're doing is they're basically giving charters out to private crews using old converted UPF ships, like older assault scouts and stuff that they've turned into scout vessels. And so the players would be working under contract with this corporation and just going out and doing their own thing, um, exploring planets, strange new worlds, new civilizations. And there is a map for Star Frontiers that's in Alphadon. That's a good map of the setting that shows the various planets and that are out there. Some of them are named, some of them are not, and there's room for you to expand into your own directions if you want, which I think is always great. It allows you to um, create worlds or define worlds that are already on the map even and aren't but then maybe you want to detail them your own way. This is one of the things that happens in the pages of the fanzines. Is the fanzines will often have a write-up of a world, and then you're like, okay, well, I don't want that version of the world, so I'm going to do my own. You don't have to adhere to that. I mean, it's there for you if you want to. But I think that's the best thing about most role-playing games is uh you can take them in whatever direction you want. Let's see here. So, all right, we are at the 1 hour mark. I did have this earmarked for 2 hours. Um, so I can go out for another hour if folks have questions or want to know more. Um, there's a lot to talk about, but again, it just gets down to covering the nitty gritty. Um, oh, I guess while I'm trying to fill some time, one other uh, thing about the core system as published, and something that's commented on by people who played it for a long time, is that characters do seem to start out a little underskilled, um, and that is more or less true depending on what you're looking for in a game. However, it is really easy to tweak that just to give you know give your players X number of XP to spend prior to play, and they can have more. There's been a couple articles in the fanzines also on. There's one that's called the Skilled Frontier, which is about starting characters with uh, more skills. Um, Stands to reason. And then there's, I know Thomas Veralt has done one on doing mid-career folks. Hey, geek. And oh, 6-0, awesome. That is good. You always you're clearly a proud papa when it comes to your kiddos, so that's good to see. And now you have to do work, so get to it. Uh, and there's Thomas right there, Mr. Tabletop Tap Room, sneaking in disguise. 3 skills, he says. Um, so yeah, you don't have a lot of skills, but then again, so the way I remember it. Skills in Star Frontiers are not like skills in a lot of systems. Skills are there to do things that require skills. Oh, that's for the Skilled Frontier. Yeah, so you there's a lot of stuff that you can just assume people can do. And you don't have to have a skill for a lot of stuff. I mean, you're not going to be repairing robots without a skill, obviously, but you know, still, they're the skills kind of assume that you're going to be doing things with those skills and not just kind of like D&D. I've got my perception skill. Um, you know, uh, Squirrel Hermit, yes, it is a classless skill based system, and I do prefer those. Um, there are uh, professions in the game, but that just kind of determines your focus of your skills, and it's not something you really have to tournament ahead of time. You just kind of pick like a specialty. Uh, yeah, so that's a fun one. Hey, we're up to 7 people minus me. That equals 6. That's good. So, and Thomas is always looking for people to write for the game. So if you have played, or if you have just even great ideas, it's always worth putting stuff together. And I'm always here too. If you want to work together on something, it's fun. Like I said before, I'm great at creating stuff, but often bad on the mechanics. I don't have the encyclopedic recollection that Thomas does. Yeah, like Thomas is the expert, and if he wants to come on the stream, there is a stream invite at the top of the chat window. I don't know if you're in a place where you can actually join into the stream, but it would be fun to have him on sometime. No die rolls for looking for something. Don't want the halt. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Your stats, your skills are for doing skill based stuff. Equipment, creatures, adventures. Yeah. Yep. And Thomas is great for helping with the mechanics. I mean, I'm good, and what I often find is the best way. Oh, there he is. Welcome, sir. How's it going? The one, the only Gedeon.
I gotta mute. Let me see where I am at here. Can you hear me?
I can. You're coming through loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just struggling with my tech. All right. Looks like we're good.
Yeah, you're on the screen. You're fine. Yeah. So everybody who is watching, Tom here is also known as Gedeon, and he is the Tabletop Tap Room. He is probably the most vocal Star Frontiers guy out there right now. I would say he is the spearhead of the and not to wax too poetically, I'd probably say the heart and soul of continuing Star Frontiers. I think that's not a reach. He got me into the game, back through Star Frontiersman, the Star Frontiersman magazine, as my stuff had just been sitting on a shelf. And through the pages of those magazines, and then interacting with him early on that article on viruses in the frontier, really
I like that article.
That article was fun. You didn't give yourself an author's credit, but I know from going back and reading it, I didn't make all of that stuff up. 90% of it maybe, but there's at least like 1 or 2 things in there that were yours. So you really deserve an author credit. But no, it's
I have over 200 author credits.
I know
officially, and sometimes it's better to just let somebody else have the author's credit and make it look like the magazine's more diverse.
Exactly. I mean, it otherwise it becomes like those really like ostentatious fan films or indie films where you're like, written by, directed by, filmed by, edited,
produced by,
marketed by, catering by. But no, so yeah. While I got you here, is there, I mean, we don't have a huge audience, but there are 8 of us. So what would you like to say about Star Frontiers to the folks that are, a lot of folks in the chat are just discovering it, or, know about it by reputation alone?
Well, it's always been my favorite. I've always loved sci-fi, and, and just, it's fast play. I kind of came back to it in the day and age of 3.5, and we had a game master who, his wife insisted he had to go to dance class before he could come to D&D, and so he'd be late, and we'd be sitting there twiddling our thumbs for 30 minutes. And I said, I got a fast play game. We can run this for 30 minutes.
Oh yeah, I remember this story. This is good.
Yeah, and we literally had a combat, 2 skill challenges, and some role play in 30 minutes. And then we played 3.5 for 3 hours and only had 1 combat. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best game ever, because you can do so much with so little time. And I just thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. And I would say now I mean, combat in Star Frontiers has always been entertaining. In the few times that I've actually had a chance to actually play it, I have to admit that I did that caveat right up front. I've not had a chance to play this a lot. It's the game that I love that I've never get to play, um, and is that the combat was always interesting because the way that weapons, at least energy-based weapons, worked was always kind of fun. The whole variable damage, like having to dial up, like you know, it was something different than you get from say like Star Frontiers or Traveler, where weapons do damage. Not I know not all weapons in Star Frontiers are like that, but like the lasers at least, you could vary the damage. One was it the pistol can do like 1 to 5d10 damage or something like that.
1 to 10 SCU for that would be one to, for each SCU it's 1d10, and then the laser rifle you could go up to 20.
That's right. The pistols were even more powerful
Yeah.
than I remember. You could basically bleed your entire clip if you really needed to, and just.
But if you miss, it's a resource.
That's why
management
every
game.
good adventurer keeps his laser pistol tethered to a power belt at least.
Yeah.
Get those 50 SEUs.
But the bad guys are also using lasers, so you also want to have that albedo screen, which can soak up all that damage.
Exactly, and that's the other thing I like about Star Frontiers. The nuance of the equipment, I think, is one of the really standout parts of the game. I mentioned earlier that it was nice that it was kind of a grounded setting, even though it's got aliens and stuff. It doesn't go too fancy and too outrageous. It leaves that for the things you encounter. But
Right.
the way the equipment works is really nice and nuanced in that, you can get protection, but you have to really be strategic with your protection. You've got your suit and you've got your field, your screen. But if I recall, some suits don't work with some screens, or there's dangers involved with using some screens, or something like that.
Well, I never thought of it this way, but Richard Rose, who used to be Richie Vegas, now lives in Florida, so I guess he's Richie Florida. He pointed out to me that the suits, the defenses were kind of rock, paper, scissors.
Okay.
So you can shoot at somebody with a machine gun, but if they've got the inertia screen and the sky suit, that kind of trumps that. Then you've got the sonic screen is the wild card, and the laser screen, the albedo screen for the laser and the beam weapons. So it's just kind of a, what weapon am I using? What am I defending with? It's kind of a rock, paper, scissors. And this is the reason he doesn't allow in the Zebulon's Guide weapons and defenses, which just kind of throw it all out of whack. And I have to admit, he makes some good points. He's kind of swayed me over.
Yeah, and I seem to recall too, like you could get strategic with it, because you might have like a laser resistant screen with an inertia resistant suit, so you're kind of doubling up, because you can't know for sure, but you could sit there and say there's a good chance somebody's going to either shoot a bullet at me or an arrow or a laser, especially if you're on those outworlds, if you're on Volturnus, most of the people you're fighting there are using primitive weapons until you run into the pirates. But also, if you have that was it the skiing suit? I think it is the physical damage one. That if you run into somebody who's got a knife and they come at you, you're going to be okay, or at least better off than if you just try to double up on lasers or something like that.
And you can always just invoke that you're defending in melee, so that's a -15 for the enemy to attack. So that's always a nice.
Yeah, the active combat system is cool too. We didn't have armor class and just kind of that like one role fits all. You could really make choices in combat that were meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's cool. Is cool because the game is still alive and well, right? As it's not dead. It's still for sale on drive-thru, despite some people trying to claim it's dead and usurping the IP. But we won't go there.
Well, sometimes I feel like that guy in Monty Python on the Holy Grail. I'm not dead yet.
That's true. And it's what's funny is that I think really for
Let me
a
know when,
game
hon.
I don't even know what you're doing.
No,
For-
we're good.
okay, for a game
I
that
don't know what you're doing.
honestly hasn't had the love and long life that we have had for, say, D&D, um, it has a surprisingly powerful for a game that hasn't had the long life of D&D. It has a surprisingly powerful fan support. I think the fanzines that have come out for it are hands down leagues beyond most of the zines you see for OSR stuff. I mean, they don't outdo maybe all of the fan made or well, not fan made. I get really is OGL published stuff really just glorified fan stuff unless you actually have a printing company or something like that, because like there's a lot of stuff that's been produced by fans of D&D, for example, that really is just glorified fan service, and would be
Yeah.
relegated to the pages of a zine if not for modern desktop publishing. But for to have a focused zine for a game that hasn't had any first party publication support for decades, I think is a pretty strong indicator of how much the game is loved and how solid it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much in there, and I know the pages of Star Frontiersman have pulled in from other genres and other IPs in the past. Like we had the Xenomorph in there and some of the equipment from Aliens and stuff. But that's no different than things that would be done in Dragon. Like I mean, I remember Dragon pulling in what is it? The Saurians, I think, are actually not. They're actually from another IP, but somebody decided to write them up for for Star Frontiers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not just an original fabrication. But yeah, it's kind of funny that it just. I keep wondering, and I know you've expressed this before, why WotC doesn't exploit it. I mean, I'm kind of happy they haven't, but it seems like they're just leaving money on the table. I mean, if anything, they could do it a massive disservice and try and squeeze it out as a 5e mechanic. I hope they would never do that. But if anything, they've got the IP, and they've even got like decent artwork from like the Alternity days and all of that. Full color art and everything. It's a surprising that they haven't done a sci-fi game. They've other than Spelljammer, which was a flop in their modern incarnation, that is.
Well, after the past 2 years, I'm not sure I want WotC doing anything with Star Frontier.
Well, then that's true. That's why I said really we wouldn't really want them. And actually, this is to answer your question, RW Bishop, no company is working on Star Frontiers.
Okay, well, TSR, you have to make a differentiation between TSR Inc., which was sold to WotC way back, and this TSR LLC that is in existence now. That one is squatting on the IP. That's demonstratable. It's something that has to be litigated, and he's not going to prevail.
Let's just say the new TSR guys, at least the guy at the helm and some of his inner circle are just turds.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
they're the type of people that you would very likely flip a table on at minimum and maybe punch. But
well, I don't generally advocate violence, but yeah.
Hypothetically speaking, I mean, they're the type of people you would. I'm not saying I would punch them, but if you were going to punch somebody, they're definitely in the realm. Again, don't advocate violence, but the personality conflict there is. There's definitely some personality issues there, but I don't want to go into that. This is about positivity here.
I probably wouldn't shed a tear if I heard certain individuals got dragged out behind a barn and beaten with a stick.
Yeah, I mean, to extrapolate on that a bit more too for you, expand on that for you, RW Bishop. There's the new TSR company is a pretender who does not own any of the IP, nor the trademarks of the original TSR. They just trademarked the name again, and so they're trying to pretend that they are. So if you see stuff coming out under this new TSR entity, be very careful because yeah, they're bogus. If they're saying they even like to come out and say we are TSR, like you're nothing of TSR. There's nobody in TSR, and then they did their little grab of legitimacy with Ernie. So
yeah, there have been actually 2 other TSRs that have registered the trademark when it was dead and were using it, and one of them had failed to renew the trademark, and it had been unrenewed for like a month or 2, and these new people swooped in and grabbed it, much to the chagrin of that individual who did not have the money to sue them over it. He had a case. He could have sued. And in the end, he just changed the name of his company to Solarian Games and moved on. And I want to put a plug in, since we're talking old TSR games. Solarian Games produces the new Top Secret, because Top Secret's not really a trademarkable name.
Yeah.
So they produced the new Top Secret rules, and they went back and got the original author of Top Secret and hired him.
Nice. That was a fun one. I enjoyed that when it was out.
So it's the new Top Secret that's out under Solarian Games is like a second edition because it's the original author. And I really want to promote that because Jason Elliott's a good guy. And, I met him at ShireCon and we sat and played in a 5e game, had a lot of fun. Tammy and I went to dinner with him afterwards, and him and his wife and his partner. So, good people. And he's just trying to do good things for the gaming industry without being a jerk. He's just trying to do good product. So I want to promote Top Secret because it is like a second edition of the original, effectively. Might as well be.
That's cool. I think they got the original. And yeah, normally I wouldn't even really dedicate so much space to talking about the whole TSR kerfluffle. But I think it's important, especially with a question like we got from Bishop here, know your TSR and know who's got what. All the original TSR stuff is in the hands of WotC. So that is Wizards of the Coast has that. Most of it is available on drive-thru. The Star Frontier stuff is available digitally on drive-thru. They don't have it available for print on demand yet, do they?
Yeah, print on demand.
Okay, cool.
My books are on Tammy's side of the desk, but
I know there were some stuff that they don't have on their print on demand, and I maybe I'm confusing it with some of their other like AD&D stuff.
Yeah, no, I went and bought a bunch of the modules print on demand. I've got the hardcover of the Star Frontiers rules print on demand, just because my stuff was so battered.
Yeah. I know. Oh, another thing that's worth mentioning. I know a good number of the fanzines are even available for print on demand.
Yes.
So if you are if you're like me, and you find that the creative juices flow better when you're just flipping through a magazine, thunk. But yeah, the only one I have printed is that first collection of the first 6 issues of Star Frontiersman they did as the big book. But yeah, it's nice to have. I personally prefer physical copy when I'm creating and brainstorming, and then PDF for reference. Because I often now, especially nowadays that I play online, but even before we went to all online, because of certain things that happened, I was starting to have my laptop at the table and having my PDFs up. That way I didn't have to have 8 million books, but I would do all my writing and creating using the physical copy. And it's nice to just be able to sit down on the couch sometime and flip through and be inspired by that thing that just, maybe you've read it a dozen times or looked at it a dozen times, but your brain's in the right place and you just happen to thumb through it. So so that's cool to know that the Star Frontier stuff is available for hard copy. How do they handle the big fold out map for the city for Alpha Dawn? Is that available?
It's in the hardcover. It's just a page in there, so it's 8.5 by 11.
But in the PDF, I guess you could blow it up and have it printed,
Well, it'd be the separate sections, since you'd have to use a Adobe or something and put it together.
Separate sections could be useful though too, because maybe you don't need that giant map folded out, and you just need a city block, right? Do they have the counters? Do they have the counters in there? The
counters are in there, and people sometimes produce new counters.
There's some board game building sites that can help you with the counter productions and stuff like that. I was actually I'm always amazed at the stuff that people come up with for just their own print and play.
Yeah.
I play Pulp Valley, which is a great miniatures based, probably I would say the best miniatures based pulp adventure skirmish game. Not to mention, I say it's the best because it'll handle everything from the Shadow to Tarzan to Gunga Din to Star Wars to John Carter. It's just because it's the system is so. But anyways, where I was going with that is there's somebody made a custom set of character cards for the new Masters of the Universe miniatures that had come out for Paul Bally, and they incorporated like art from the old packaging from Masters of the Universe and stuff, and it was just brilliant. And they're all on professionally done cards because there are these websites out there that you just have to for helping you build and there's the same thing as out there for counters. So I guess so we're coming up on we got about a half an hour left, and so the chat is
I'm going to have to jump out here in
Okay.
a minute and run with the wife to go do something. But
no, that's cool. But I appreciate you coming on.
No, I appreciated the invite, and yeah, again, best game ever. I love it. It's easy to hack. Anytime I've been like, you know what, we don't have an entrenching tool like the U.S. Army issues to soldiers in Starfront. It's easy to just whip it up and put some stats to it for even using it as a weapon.
Yeah, Star Frontiers uses the metric system, so
it's easy to it's easy to create creatures, it's easy to create robots. The ships are a little fiddly. The one thing I do want to say is this whole OGL fiasco that has gone on, that we're all more or less aware of, has really made me think that WotC's not our friend, and it might be time for us to do a generic D100 rule set, file the serial numbers off of Star Frontiers, and just publish it under Creative Commons, or publish it, strip out anything that's remotely IP, and just have a generic set, and for people to publish their own adventures under.
Yeah, I know they did the one system that was sort of that, right? Was it that's
Frontier Space?
Yeah,
I have it. It's hardcover. It's thick. I reviewed it when it was in development. It's not my favorite. It's not as easy to use. I really want something like Star Frontiers that's 48-page rule book. Go.
So very much an OSR presentation of Star Frontiers.
Star Frontiers, exactly.
Which I would imagine you could probably do without a lot of fuss. It's just the hardest problem would be art. That's the hardest part about any of these projects, honestly, is art. Art's so damn expensive.
I'm good at begging for art. I know a few artists.
So Squirrel Hermit is the guy who brought that artist I mentioned. I go away, Mr. Thomas Veralt. The wife is stealing you. Bye. Everybody say hi to Tammy. Bye to Tom. See you later. Right. Have fun.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
All right, folks. So that was cool. I was glad that he could come in. And Squirrel Hermit, I did pass on the information to Tom. And so he's definitely on the list for when we need artists. Actually, you know what? While I'm here, why don't I do this? I've talked about Star Frontiersman. Let me go ahead and show you the latest issue. This is the one that I wrote for. Well, I've written for a couple of them, but this is the one I wrote my latest article for. And so let me pull this up here so you can see we got it. And I just kind of want to show what one of the magazines looks like. This is the volume 2. And that's what Tom has decided to call it since he took over as the lead and the editor on this. So got a cover here. This is cool. He mentioned he's great at begging for art. He actually was. This is a cool score because he found this piece of art in an artist's, as far as I understand it, found a piece of art in an artist's portfolio online or something. Reached out to the artist, asked if he could use it. Artist said yes. But not only did the artist say yes, he then retouched it and updated some of the color and everything to make it usable, better usable as a magazine cover. So that was great. So, and he explains that story here. This is a nice thing. When in the magazine, he's always good. Yeah, he's always good about making sure that the art is credited, and we try to highlight folks who are nice enough to share art with the group. And when I say we, I'm really not that involved on here. I've written for some stuff, so it's not like I'm making the magazine. We got our tables of contents here. You can see this issue is at least 36 pages long. If you look up top, it's long. It's 43 pages. That's pretty good for a fanzine. These are coming out quarterly, I believe, is the idea on these. But they used to come out pretty damn frequently. And then so get a letter from the editor. This is cool. This is actually custom design stuff for Star Frontiers, like shirt logo, patch logo. Got some advertisements. Looking pretty professional there, eh? Facts and lore. This is cool because in this article we kind of delves back into some of the old stuff that was published and may not have been available to everybody, because like you can see this is issue number 9 of Polyhedron he's talking about. I never saw an issue of Polyhedron. I think you actually had to be a member of RPGA or something like that to even get it or something. Talking about, he's got a little blurb here on Space Gamer talking about Ogre. Got some cartoons. We actually have like a little filler cartoons, like a good Dragon magazine of old. Set course, Pilarian cluster. So this is what I was talking about earlier about how you can make the game more or less than based on your tastes. This is a really nice little article that details a good section of space. Cartography, the Port Lawrence starport map. That's cool. Showing here just a little blurb for Drive-Thru RPG. And of course, this is a digital copy, so the links actually work. Woo! So I could go to it. Port Lauren. Port Lauren is the map that comes with the box set, and so somebody has done a reproduction of the map here. I'm pretty sure this is the map. Either that or they did the same styling. I have to admit, I haven't digested this issue completely yet. Pulse Fire handheld flamethrower. So Tom wrote this one up. This is a real thing. This is a thing that is manufactured by a company today. He reached out to them and asked them if they would mind him doing this, putting it in here. But it's great. And this is the kind of stuff that appears in this magazine all the time. New weapons, new systems. It's got the Pulse Fire, standalone, and then a weapon attachment, so you can put a flamethrower on your gun. And it goes into details with, backpack tanks, replacement ammo, a suit. This is the article I wrote. Dead worms tell no tales. Sathar technology for avoiding capture. He misspelled my last name, but shit happens. So this is actually based on a brief article that was done by another writer back during back in the D20 days. There was like the D20 Modern, and he'd done an article, and I expanded on it to where we have explosive nanites and then biophagic nanites. So we got 2 ways. Sathar might just blow up on you. And so the type A are the small boom, and then the type B are the big boom. This is to basically kill you and whoever's maybe around you, so get rid of witnesses. This is to maybe bring down part of the building. This one just melts you, which is kind of what's going on in this piece of artwork. And this is cool because we got original art. I keep saying he got original art for my article. That's awesome. And then I went in to write about detecting and countering the nanites, and then a bit on the implants. This was just kind of a side bit because I mentioned earlier the Sathar are all about like intrigue and stuff. So we got neurodisruption implants. These basically blank their minds. blank people's minds. So like, okay, you've been caught. Now you're a vegetable. And then we went into, like to do with some of this stuff when we write up things that are very plot based and not just a brief piece of equipment, some plot hooks and adventure seeds. So I came up with that. And then this is a bit on where I got the article, where I got the idea for the article. Let's see. He also likes to throw in advertisements. These can be used for in-world stuff, kind of like you saw in the old Cyberpunk books. I really liked it in the old Cyberpunk books where they would often have little insets for in-world advertisements. Mines in the Frontier. This is a whole article on mines, like actual, shipping mines. This is a canonical mine layer. This is kind of a good glimpse of the exterior of what some of the ships look like in Star Frontiers. And so this article goes into good detail on mines, as well as the Kangaroo class mine layer. I mentioned earlier the decks are arranged perpendicular to the direction of flight. We even get deck plans, which is cool. Look at that. So this is a playable ship, even though you might only use it in a tactical sense, but it does give you a deck plan. And these deck plans are often really useful. More so, I mean, unless you're playing a military campaign on a minesweeper, and I have to imagine that would be like the most boring campaign ever. However, stuff can happen on ships, and having those ships available is neat. Maybe there's a mine layer that has gone silent, and you have to go find it, or you have to sneak onto the mine layer to get to somebody. Who knows? But you would have the mine layer. You can see here we got a couple of shuttle points, lifeboats, and then whole system for mines. Really cool because we got like mines that are just explosive. We got mines that are packing lasers. So that's cool. Enemy mines. This is neat. Royal Marines Adventure. So he's going on with the tradition of presenting a new piece of equipment, new tech, and then building off of that. Hey, Shadow, welcome. We're in the home stretch here, last half hour of the stream, just kind of going over the latest / first issue of the new Star Frontiersman Volume 2. This is the issue that I wrote an article for, but or one of the issues I wrote an article for. There's that freighter that we were looking at earlier. But this article here, like I said, this is, engaging those new mine rules, but making an adventure. And it's got some Southar ships, and here's the ship write-ups for the various ships in the game. Seeker drones, a new weapon system for Nighthawks, which is the ship-to-ship combat. Really cool. And there are this is the stuff that always amazes me, because these people who write these articles will come up with full loads for pricing, and the breakdowns of the equipment and all of that, and that's some serious know-how on how the system works. Shadow, if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and throw them in. If you want to come into the stream for a couple of minutes, the link's at the top. Feel free. Let's see. More stuff on the Seeker missiles. A little inset advert for Starlaw. I mentioned them before, and here's a Dralicite Starlawman with his helmet and his bandolier. Dangers in training. This is fiction. This is another nice thing. We're a full-on magazine here, so people produce fiction, which is great. It makes the game. It fills out the game. Let's see. And these here, I think, are actually characters from the piece of fiction, which, how cool is that? Get a piece of fiction, and then now you have NPCs. There's that cover art again. And this is another thing that just, you lucky bastard, just waking up at 11:30 on a Sunday, or your time 10:30. But or no, excuse me, 8:30. Yeah, so I guess it's kind of early. Never mind. But another thing that appears in the magazines frequently is just pre-made characters or NPCs. So here we have the Star Devil. He's a Vrusk criminal. Use him in your games however you want. That's awesome. And that's just that's that's interesting because that's supposed to, yeah. So that's the last page of the actual magazine. Um, but yeah, it's Star Frontiersman is great. I'm gonna go back and pull up the very first one here too, just so you can see in contrast, like how the magazine started and understand just how cool it was that this was also a thing. Oh, there's that stupid picture of the races. All right. So here's Star Frontiersman #1. And this is the magazine that started it all. um, done at a different time with different software. You look at the date on this is 2007. So this is pushing 2 decades ago. 16 pages, 18 pages, so not the largest issue, but a pretty solid start. But you can even see from the very beginning, very professional presentation. This is Bill Logan was the editor at the time, and so we got a good solid forward and right into the equipment. New weapons. We got a light stunner pistol. We got a blast pistol. Blast pistols are interesting because I think you heard me and Tom talking about it earlier. Standard laser weapons in Star Frontiers have an adjustable setting that you can vary the amount of energy they put out, allowing you to kind of set what they're being used for. Blast pistols were very different in that they were a preset amount of damage and therefore a little bit more. They were cheaper and then also just kind of less fiddly. We also have rules in here for um, projectile weapons, for semi-automatic pistols, gyrojet wrist rockets, security skin suits. Skin suits are the anti-impact suits, the ones that deal with physical damage. The stealth skin. So yeah, it's just like you can see already right from the get-go, the magazine was all about presenting you with new playable options and new stuff to put in. Miscellaneous equipment, even it's not all guns. That's the other cool thing. You have a Dura raft or an Enviro tent, jump boots, survival kits, Visicoms, and mind you, I love one of the things I love in the game too is the old style naming for things like you know it's just fun. Wide field recorders, and then we jump into usable locations. This is a prison, so if you need a prison for your game, there you go. Archetypes. So this was a fun idea that they started playing with. So yes, character generation from scratch can be fun and good. Sometimes it's not the best, and for new players. And so having like a preset archetype that is already laid out is a great way to go. And here we have the Dralisite martial artist, which if you think about a amorphic alien who can grow new limbs and everything, a martial artist is just a horrible career for them, or not a great career for them, but a horrible opponent, I should say. So yeah, then you know stuff bringing in like edges and flaws, and then we have Vrusk Smuggler, and then already coming up with new character races. New character races I like to look at as something that is good if you need them, so you have them, but I would be really leery to stuff too many of them into the frontier because then it starts feeling like Star Wars. Um, and one of the things that's nice about the Star Frontiers setting is it is not Star Wars. The core four are everywhere. So if you are going to have these other races, kind of maybe keep them localized, or maybe their presence out in the greater frontier are minimal. But even as early as the box set, they mention another race. I think it's called a Gorlian or something like that. And there's some speculation as to what that is. Like, was the Gorlian actually just the early working name for for the Yazirians? Because it sounds like gorilla, and and so maybe they already knew they were going to have a simian, but they maybe changed the name. So yeah, and with Star Frontiers races, their breakdowns are not just about statistics. There's a oh, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about the modules earlier. Star Frontiers modules very quickly broke down into a great system of organization where they would have sections marked as the alpha section, the beta section, such and such, and each section was supposed to present specific information to the module. Um, it and so you would as they came out, you would always have that. Well, same thing goes with the alien races. When a race is presented in Star Frontiers, you get the physical structure, you get the senses, you get their speech, so you know what they look like, how they perceive the world, what their speech sounds like, and do they have difficulties? For example, Vrusk, for example, oddly enough, can speak the kind of basic Pangalactic, um, but people can't speak Vrusk because you need bug mouth parts. And then, of course, you'll have your physical breakdown here, um, reproductive system. This is included in here mostly, I feel, just for that scientific aspect. Because if you remember early on in the at the beginning in the box set, that we had those anatomical diagrams. They were kind of being presented as sort of data files. Then we get societies and customs and attitudes, which attitudes is cool because this is about how they perceive other species usually, and then some special abilities. And special abilities are usually pretty low key, like ultrasonic communication and being amphibious. They're not out there blasting people with their mind and stuff, or you know f- Hulk raging. And there may be some down the road and some of the issues that are a little bit more or less crazy, but um, so we jump right into an adversaries article. This is an article that a series of articles that came up pretty frequently throughout the magazine, where you would get things to fight. Security robots. I'm going to touch bases on robots again for Star Frontiers because robots are so core to the game. There's a lot written into the game with them. So often in adventures you will run into robots, but robots are generally controlled by a central intelligence in the facilities and stuff. So it kind of comes down to this interesting game of, can you hack into the robot and reprogram it? Can you hack the brain that's managing the facility? And so robots become a really fun part of the universe and the gameplay. And they come in all sorts of forms. This article's on security robots, but there are just like, there are maintenance robots and there are bartender robots. New rules. One thing that I love about a good fanzine, and that we also used to see in more polished magazines like Dragon and all, is when you're presented with alternate ways to do things. You know, this is a new way of doing experience points, and I love the fact that he writes about the old way and then the new way, which is really cool. I'm not going to go into it. And then skills. And this is system says been deeply criticized as boxy and restrictive, disallowing many characters concepts. And this is just a new approach for skills. So from issue 1, we're already delving into new ways to play, new things to play against. So that's cool too. And then issue number 1, with 2 pages left to go, an adventure. It's not huge. Oh wait, on page 18 it's an adventure, but it's an outline. So Bishop, the robots are affiliated with whoever really owns and operates them. So the Sathar have robots too, but Pangalactic Corporation has their robots. Starlaw has its own robots. Individual ships usually have robot crewmen. For example, if I pull up that that deck plan I did earlier, that one that I mapped out. If you look down here where did I put it? here we go. If I zoom in to, if you look here, you zoom into the to this deck here, the mechanical deck. There's a little robot storage there. This is a medical robot that would be used for engaging with people who are highly infected or something. That's the hostile isolation. But there's also frames here for storing other robots or equipment. So yeah, robots are pretty ever present in Star Frontiers and very useful. But there's like the key thing that I like about the robots is they are part of not just the universe, but they're part of the gameplay. They're almost like a mini game of themselves, not in the classic sense of mini game, but because they're there and they can really be useful to you. It's it's fun to have them in the game system. Let's see. While I'm pulling up issues, so we have, you saw that's issue number 1 of Star Frontiers, man. Here's issue 25 before the run of the original Star Frontiers ended. The volume 1, but as you can see, a lovely cover. I mean, that's amazing. And so this one, if I recall, is, yeah, this whole issue is an adventure. And you can see it's a water world, and I mentioned those sections before, talking about, you know, the alpha section. So the alpha section is where we will cover. It's cool because it'll have all of the abbreviations that are going to be used. Um, Alpha Section 1, Alpha Section 1A, so adventuring underwater, specific environmental hazards. This is the Alpha Section was all of the stuff to kind of break down any of the new stuff that's going to be used in that module. And then we would break into, let's see, going through, we get into Alpha Section 1B, underwater perception, like how is vision and all of that affected underwater. Underwater movements. So this is, again, all the new rules and base concessions of this particular adventure setting. And so underwater combat, and then we get into the beta section. So the beta section is general adventure background and introduction. So this is where the GM would start to read stuff. We've got here the system briefs. Most modules that took place on another planet would have a system brief, and you can see here we've got a breakdown with a standard text box for, you know, the star, the total number of planets of the system, habitable worlds, compositions, moons, artificial satellites, you know, gravity, and all of that. All the fun stuff that you would need to break down a science fiction game and really have enough detail to run it to where each world is characterful. And then going through, we have one of our fun little ads inserted. Beta section 2, we got employment, like what kind of jobs, what are the players going to be presented with, placing the call, the interview. This is just all the stuff kind of setting up the adventure and the basic structure, the job, pay, employee provided equipment. Again, the beta section sets it up here. Here's the ship that they will offer you in the game, the ship's equipment. And then the gamma section is where the adventure begins. And again, this is a standard format that that is taken from the published modules originally by TSR. And so the subsections in the gamma section are generally like either encounter locations, or in this case, they seem to be like pre-programmed events, because clearly this is like a long-term game. Like stuff is happening over time as you're on this planet. And then part 2 is the Delta section. This is into the unknown. So after the alpha and the beta sections, each set change usually becomes a new section. So like gamma would become one part of the adventure, and then like if you move to a new location, it's going to be Delta. This is like into the unknown. And then that we got this cool underwater city. So placards here, because I think there's a map involving color coding. Yeah, see right there. But this is a good one because I can actually show you that breakdown of the how the adventures were. Zeta section, adventure support materials. So this is where they would place creature write-ups, equipment write-ups, any of the hard data for an adventure goes into your Zeta section. And so you can see there's a lot of stuff here because we have an underwater culture. That is a big beastie that I don't want to fight. Continuing on to underwater craft, really cool stuff. All of this is a pretty hefty Zeta section, I have to say, because some of the modules didn't have all of this. But yeah, so lots of stuff, and then we have of course we get into pre-made characters or NPCs. A lot of art's gonna in a fanzine is gonna be hit and miss, and sometimes you get pretty basic stuff. But still, it's nice to have a basic drawing, if nothing. And so we got lots of characters, so lots of NPCs and the like. Equipment issued to each of these mercenaries. Flora and fauna encounter tables. And here's the creature write-ups. So you can see a lot of stuff. I'm sure a lot of this is, it's all borrowed art with permission and credited. They did a big old ecosystem for this one. Not all of them are that huge. And then an article on Changing Frontier. This is before, like I said, this is the last issue of Star Frontiers, and then it switched over to Frontier Explorer. And I can show you actually the progression. I got about 5 minutes left. So Frontier Explorer went 36 issues, and the first one was first issue of Frontier Explorer was 49 pages. And as you can see, we've got the Dralisite Creed. This is a cool thing we got in a lot of these too, is articles on the deep dives into aspects of the aliens, the species culture, which is fun. And so then crafting compelling characters and role-playing game, how-to articles. Every good fanzine or legit magazine should have articles and discussions on helping you play the game better. Let's see. Here's a planet dossier here, Los End. Let's see, and looks like we have the Losu Dragon, which is a creature for Los End. Yeah, so I mean, it's a great. These magazines were great. Maps, equipment, and then by the time this magazine ended in issue 36, we had this cool cover that shows the Core 4 aliens kind of sailing off into the sunset as the magazine ends, and some really good quality art for the vehicles and equipment. Domestic service PSAs, the new skills, Bucketmouth Crab of Los End. As you read through these articles too, you'll see that there's a lot of fan favorite planets that people like to detail. So I got about 3 minutes left. I'm gonna have to wrap it up. My wife just got home, and actually I need to make myself available because she's been picking up some new furniture for my game space. So I kind of have to make myself available. One final note. So I just want to kind of recap. All of the original Star Frontiers materials are available for purchase in PDF or print on demand on DriveThruRPG. Star Frontiersman Volume 1 and 2 are available at Pay What You Want on DriveThruRPG also. Frontier Explorer is also available, Pay What You Want, on DriveThruRPG. Some notes on the Star Frontiersman. You may find that there are issues that are missing, or you may find references in in other articles and stuff referencing some stuff that's maybe missing from the issues you get. There was a weird trademark grab that happened at one point that caused WotC to tighten its grip a bit, and so they wanted all of their IP stuff taken out of the magazine, stuff that was actually from previously published stuff. The fanzines are published under their own fan license, so they're they've actually got the blessings of WotC. But yeah, Grumpy, I'm sorry you actually got here just as I was able to as I was actually about to leave. But guys, the links are going to be in the description for where you can get the stuff. And check out Tabletop Tap Room if you want. He has every Friday he does Fanzine Friday, where he covers an issue of Star Frontiersman and then Frontier Explorer. He's going through them all, so it's a great way to kind of recap. But yeah, everybody have a great rest of your week, and look for more Roll for Surprise impromptu streams that'll pop up here and there. They're kind of like the pop-up markets, but except for their streams with me. I gotta go. Have a good one. Thanks for everybody who showed up. Thanks, Tom, for actually coming on and chatting with me for a bit. Have fun, folks.